Hey, what's up, y'all? Michael Walker here again, and Dr. Corey Yeager with our second installment of Critical Harmony. Today, we're going to talk about a few things, really dive into the Serena Williams situation that has been going on in the media, probably talk about a little bit of implicit bias and unconscious bias, interchangeable terms. And then from there, we'll see where the conversation takes us, but that's kind of what we're going to start off with for this session.
Yeah.
So, yeah, glad and appreciate you guys listening in the first time, so hopefully the second one will do it justice again. But what's been going on in the media lately is this picture that's been kind of floating around the internet around Serena Williams and the case about her throwing a tantrum and how they've depicted her in that image. So I know there's been some talk about it's just a cartoon. There's some other folks on the side who's saying that it's racially motivated. So there's a whole lot going on. And something that we talk about all the time in the work that myself and Dr. Yeager do is that people are looking at it as just an isolated incident, but what we fail to realize is it's not just an isolated incident. In that one picture comes 400 years of what has impacted black and brown folks. Mm-hmm. So even though you may look at it and say, well, it's just a cartoonist who drew a picture of a character, and of course they exaggerate features on those types of pictures. Of course they're gonna make her face look a certain way or exaggerate the emotion that she was showing during that time. Yep, I'm not gonna argue with that. That definitely is possible. But there's also a different perspective of people of color who see the old Jim Crow and the pictures of Sambo when they did distorted lips.
You know where I grew up? There was a restaurant called Sambo's.
I've heard of it before.
There was a restaurant where I grew up in my little small town in Kansas. The name of the restaurant was Sambo's. And that's, I mean, so I know you call me old. I'm 49. Not that old.
That ain't that old, right?
No, to say the name of the restaurant was Sambo's? How you get away with that?
What they serve in there?
I don't know what they served.
Did you go there?
Yes, I went to Sambo's.
So what
That's
you eat?
crazy. I don't remember, dog. I don't even remember. I just remember the fact that the name of the restaurant was Sambo's. And I remember my brother and I having, they had like little record players, and there was a record that played the story of Little Black Sambo. You remember? Do you remember the story of Little Black Sambo? And I'd have to go back and look. I was to talk to my brother, and it was all in that same time frame. So I was younger hearing the story of Little Black Sambo, but probably at 12 or 13, 10, 12, Sambo, the restaurant. It wasn't there long, I don't think, but I remember that restaurant. So when we talk about, to your point, Mike, when we talk about things like police brutality or the Serena Williams situation in the cartoon, you hit it. There's 400 years of history that are dumped on those moments. So they're not in isolation. So if a young brown boy is shot and killed by the police, that many times for white folks is tragic. But it's just, so they move quickly to the technical. So is there a dashboard camera? Did the police officer have a body camera on? Well, let's wait to see what comes out and blah, blah, blah. They do that pretty quickly because it's more technical for them. We see it and bring 400 years of history rushing onto the moment. It ain't just a little black boy that got shot. It goes back to those deep-rooted histories that we have suffered from. All the 40 years of oppression end up in that moment. And then what happens is you get white folks and black folks arguing then about it. Because we're saying, no, it's not just about that situation. It's that 400 years of history. This has been happening to our people since the beginning. So we talk about police brutality, and when we're having conversations, Mike, we always say, so no one is really taking the time to talk about the origins, the history of policing in this country. So if we take just a moment and know, what are the beginnings of policing in America? Well, it's the slave patrols. The very first police force in this country and the growth of police forces from the beginning, the genesis was the slave patrols. And the slave patrols were given the authority to go out and capture slaves, and if they were to run, you can kill them, you won't face any charges. And if you capture them and bring them back, we'll pay you. So those were and usually the folks that were in the slave patrols were those whites that financially were at the bottom of the barrel. But as long as they were above those blacks, they had a role in the society. So we don't talk about those things, but all of those issues show up in the moments that police brutality, Serena, it's not just, they don't operate on their own. I know I just budged in,
No.
but Sambo's, you got me saying, Sambo's.
And even as you say that the 400 years, right, and what the slave patrols were about, they were able to, you said, kill slaves and not face any consequences.
Mm-hmm.
We see that happening right now.
Today.
We see it happening often.
Ain't nothing changed with the date.
Often,
Yeah.
where white officers are killing unarmed black men and they are not facing any charges.
That's right.
Not facing any charges.
So if that's the case, Mike, what do we talk about all the time is, because people don't really want to talk about that stuff. That's hard to discuss. One way that we found to be able to at least hold those conversations, we were just doing it with a group today, that anytime you talk about race, one of the things that we know about race is that from a young age, most people are told there's 2 or 3 things that you don't talk about outside of this house. Don't talk about how much money mom and dad make or how little mom and dad make. Don't tell nobody how we voted in that last election. Nobody need to know what we did.
Why not?
Because we don't want to be associated with one side or the other, and we don't want people to really know. I don't want people to know I voted for Trump. Don't go telling people at school that we voted for Trump. I don't want that. I don't want your teacher looking at us different. Just don't do it. And the last thing is, don't talk about race. We don't need to be talking about race. That's not something we do. Leave it alone. So I don't even know if those are specific conversations that are held in homes, but usually they're at least implied.
Yeah.
May not say it out loud, but it's at the very least implied. One way that you can hold these conversations of race that we're finding out is to talk through the lens and conversation of bias. Everybody got it. I know I'm biased. We all hold these biases. And if we can come to that conclusion, the neuroscience tells us something about bias. The brain is doing its job pretty effectively and has for thousands of years. And if we can say that the cartoonist that drew Serena in the way that he drew Serena and drew Serena's opponent as blonde,
That's the other piece, yeah.
if we know that bias may be impacting how they drew that picture, bias may be impacting, if the research tells us that bias may be impacting how officers, how quickly they may pull their firearm and shoot an unarmed black person compared to a white person. The neuroscience, the science, the bias tells us something about that. That may be a more acceptable, socially acceptable form of conversation, as sad as that may be. That we can't just talk about it because it won't be heard.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, as we're talking about the Serena case situation, I mean, the other thing that comes up is people are saying, well, it was an Australian artist. He may not have, or she may not have any context connected to the Jim Crow era.
They got Aborigines over there, though.
I know, I'm just saying, but that's what...
Why are you trying to start with me?
I'm not trying to start.
Michael.
I'm not trying to start you.
Michael.
I'm just saying that's what folks tend to say. But I'm always saying.
That's right.
So that bias is held and it's been created for centuries. It's been created for decades. Whatever word you want to use, it's been created, and it's been created by the media. So the media continues to perpetuate that. So as you have said earlier, you know, the cartoonists may not even know what they were necessarily drawing.
Mm-hmm.
But because the media has put a portrayal in our mind of what black and brown look like,
Mm-hmm.
and we start to draw those images without even taking a second thought.
That's right.
Right? And you hit it on the head. They characterize the young lady that's Haitian and Japanese descent as a white girl on that
That's right. Blonde.
on that artist, on that cartoon. And I think it even had some words about like "let her win" or something.
Let her win is the caption.
Yeah, let her win. So I don't know who was saying that. Was it the umpire? I
The
think it's
umpire's
umpire.
talking to the Haitian Japanese girl that won. The umpire's saying, just let her win. Like, she's throwing a fit, just let her win.
Yeah, Naomi Osaka, right?
I think that,
Yeah,
I'm
Naomi
not sure.
Osaka
Yeah,
is her name.
that's what it is.
For sure.
So the other thing that I'm reminded then of is there's this thing that we use in our conversations. If you look at that story of the father that killed, or at least allegedly killed, his entire family, his wife and his little daughters, there's a little caption, a little segment that talks about how he was portrayed in the media. The media showed pictures of him at Disneyland with his whole family and pictures of them on other vacations and smiling almost in a stylistic way, that every picture it was the whole family smiling, as if it was like the perfect family. But he allegedly killed all of them. Even said that the daughter saw him as her hero. But then there's another story alongside that there was an African-American man, I think it was in Phoenix?
Yeah.
In Phoenix, Arizona, that was with his daughter. I think it was like a 7-Eleven or someplace, that his daughter went into the bathroom and some gentleman tried to follow her into the bathroom and break into the stall. You would assume to sexually assault, I don't know exactly. He got word of it. He went to the authorities there, like the security told them. They didn't do anything. He followed the man out and beat the brakes off of him, and ultimately the guy died. Well, as the media portrayed him, it portrayed him only with the image of him being locked up in the jumpsuit. It didn't use his name in the description of the story, only a black man. Didn't show pictures of him and his daughter lovingly together. So that is, again, that media having its bias and showing up. Some of that, we hope, is implicit or unconscious. Some of it we know ain't.
Right.
Yeah, I'm about to show his ass they're animals. So we should show them as animals. So the details on that Dallas police officer case are starting to come out too now.
There's a lot of details on that. A lot of folks have been looking into that to find out what really occurred, because there's been, kind of what has heard is that she's changed her story several times about whether the door was locked, whether it was unlocked. She was at the wrong apartment, wrong floor, took the elevator up and whatnot. So there's a whole lot of discrepancies going on. But I guess my question about that whole situation is, if you try to use your key and the door was locked, how did you ultimately get in?
Yeah, did they say that the door might have been ajar?
Well, that's the second story. I'm saying, so the story keeps
Multiple
changing.
stories.
Yeah, so you don't know what the real true story is. There's been some folks who are saying that she's been coached by her union to have these different stories to change up to protect her. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's definitely an unfortunate situation. And just recently, they went and did a search warrant on his house.
That's my point.
They did a search warrant on his house and located some different stuff and brought up some things. I'm not going to mention those here because it's all to devalue him as a person and to make him look like a criminal when he was sitting in his house, minding his business, somebody came into his space.
Hey, man, if you come into my house, in my front door, and I'm in my chair, I got my chair. Don't sit in my chair next time you're over either. I told you about that. But I'm sitting in my chair, and you come in, and I'm asleep, and you giving me demands.
Yeah.
Who the hell are you talking to?
Looking at you crazy.
That's right.
And you came in unannounced. So it's not like I opened the door and let you in and we having a conversation. You done pretty much broke into my house.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm not minding your orders. Why?
So then the piece, and you hit the piece that I thought becomes even more important. Why would they be following up to get a warrant to go through his house to see? He didn't do anything wrong. He's dead. He was killed. What do you need to search his home for? Well, I would assume I want to search his home to paint a negative picture of him.
For sure.
Oh, he got he got weed in here, he got this, or whatever it is. We want to find things that we can paint a negative picture of him that will help the broader community say, well, you just got to know, well, he was da-da-da, they found da-da-da in there, which has nothing to do with the situation. But now we can see why she would shoot him. He was a thug.
Yeah.
Right? That's sad, harsh reality.
And what really, I'm always tying this back to education. What really starts to speak to me is that, so all these different news stories, media stories, caricatures, all those different things that are coming out, it starts to put thoughts into everybody's head who's walking around the world and who has to interact with people on a daily basis. And that's where biases start to be created, right? So the media has a huge part in creating the biases that we ultimately own, but it's because of what we're watching on TV and how they are portraying different people in different aspects of society. Now, as I bring it back to education, the piece is, how is this playing out inside of our schools? So if I am starting to see on TV every night that a black man is guilty, even though he was the one that was the victim initially, but we have created, what do you call that, burden of suspicion? We've created some suspicion on him, some suspicion about him. So he might have been bad, so let's do that. How is it happening in our schools every day with our teachers and our students? Specifically our black males. Is that playing out in our schools? Well, obviously, I'm going to say yes, because when we look again at disproportionality of suspension and referrals out of classroom, that speaks exactly and directly to that point. I mean, there's no dancing around that. That speaks directly to how these biases have been created in our spaces. And to really point it out is that when we control for objective acts around suspension, so if a student got into a fight or a student brought a weapon or, something to that effect, the suspension rates and the referral out of class rates mirror each other for black and white students. Mirror each other. So it's like a 5% for white students with those cases and 7% for black students. So it's pretty close. But when we add the subjectivity into play, where we start talking about disrespect or disobedience or insubordination, that's where you start to see the disproportionality, because now it's on the person who is receiving whatever it is that we're receiving. So that's where our biases start to play in those decisions that we make. And so how do we be aware of that? I guess what we're really trying to get people to think about is the decisions and choices you make on a daily basis. How do I start to slow the process down so that I can think through the situation, the scenario, before I make a decision? Now, I'm not saying that's easy, but that's the work that we have to be mindful of, because we all have the ability to make the wrong decision because of our bias, right? So if we're willing to slow down, learn, and grow, then we got a better chance of making better decisions on behalf of all students, but most importantly, the students that have been marginalized through our educational system.
Yeah, but we got to be clear. If I don't get no extra pay for slowing down and making better decisions. What does a white teacher get, or a white police officer get, for slowing down and making more informed decisions about what their next steps they'll do with this person of color, hoping for better outcomes? They don't get more pay for it. It is an issue of morality. So we keep saying out loud that these conversations, these things that we discuss, bias, discrimination, all of these things are issues of morality. So if it is an issue of morality, you're not going to get benefit from figuring that out and working on it specifically like you would other issues. But what we hope people would understand is that you at least get to correct the moral compass in your life. You get to adjust the moral compass to a more due north. And hopefully all of us are interested in that moral compass. But I would submit, we would submit, that our country is off kilter. The compass is off kilter. And maybe it has been for many years. But recently, the leadership in our country, the moral compass from our leadership appears off kilter. So I'm gonna own that for myself. I ain't gonna put that on nobody else. That's what I think. And if the leadership's moral compass is broken, the folks following that leadership, because you would hope that you should be able to follow the leaders in the spaces that you occupy. If they have broken moral compasses, then many are following out of whack. We got to recognize that, and there may be things that you can do about the people that have broken those moral compasses, but we must find our own true north. As black and brown communities, we need our true north. As a collective community that is America, we need to find that true north. And sometimes you can't get it from the leadership. Sometimes the head coach don't know what the hell they doing. So when they call timeout, or we on the field or on the court, like, hey, coach calling bullshit. Well, we're not going to argue with him right now, but Mike, we finna change the play. Because the head coach don't know what he's talking about.
Players.
Yeah, we're going to change the play because he don't know what he's talking about.
Right.
Right? So we're not going to argue with the head coach. Hey, Mike, what we going to do? No, run the pick and roll. I know he didn't call it. Run the pick and roll, dog. And we got to score.
Let's get this bucket.
And we got to score.
Let's get this bucket.
Right? So we need to make that adjustment on our own. As a society, we need to be adjusting, not counting on others to lead us, lead ourselves.
Yeah. And as you're speaking on that, Doc, one thing that keeps coming to my mind is that the kids are watching. So every decision that we make, every instance, every situation, scenario that we're in, depending on what we make, we are impacting the young people that are watching us.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're watching us as we're making the decision about them or making the decision about their parents or about another student, they are watching and paying close attention. And if we are really trying to make this world a better place, we're teaching them what to do in the future. So our biases will continue because we are putting that on our babies and not allowing them to make their own decisions, better decisions, because we ain't making better decisions. And that's difficult, right? That's difficult. I think you talk about the hippocampus, right? Is when I make decisions that I'm not aware of because of something that's happened in the past, right? I know you used a scenario about the ink pen, right? I'm talking on the phone, or no, I'm doing some work with a red ink pen, and I'm writing. I get a phone call, and some bad news on the other end of that phone call, right? 6 months later, I write with a red ink pen. All of a sudden, I get sad. It's because the hippocampus has filed that away, saying that last time you wrote with that red ink pen, you got some bad news, and so now your body is reacting to that. Well, that happens to our kids, right? So our kids are getting some secondary trauma through that because they have been in spaces where they are seeing things that are occurring, not necessarily being aware of it, but their parents are doing certain things, or the adults around them are doing certain things, and now it's impacting them as they get older, and now they're making those same decisions that their parents may have been making.
That's right.
Which is unfortunate, which is really unfortunate, because we want to be a society that we are getting better and not getting worse. And in order to do that, we have to make the change.
Is it getting worse?
Was it staying the same?
Well, I think that is so we may say it's getting worse, but that's relative. A lot of people be like, well, we're trying to make America great again. Right? It ain't getting worse. We're getting it better. We're fixing it. We're getting it back to the way it was.
Yeah, but when they say they're fixing it and better for who?
Yeah, but relative to, if I think 1954 was really good, 1953 before any, then if we can move closer to 1953, I feel like it's better. Right? I mean, relatively.
I mean, there is that point in that perspective, but we ain't talking about that point in that perspective. We're trying to get away from that.
Yeah, we are trying to get but sometimes you got to lean in to lean away, baby. You got to lean into it. You talk about that hippocampus piece. So I'm saying to teachers all the time, I know I heard it. I know my babies hear it. Sometimes you're going to hear, hey, you got to watch them teachers at school, boy. They ain't messing with y'all. They not finna mess with y'all. They ain't with you like that. And the teachers I had a second, third grade teacher. I was a decently bright kid, never the smartest, but decently bright. And my mom tells a story of going to talk to the teacher after the grades came out. I was getting like a C in math, but the teacher continuously had me teaching other kids. So I've always been pretty good at math. She was giving me a C. My mom asked, hey, why is Corey have a C? She said, well, it's average. You should be okay with, he's a black kid, he's doing average. and the argument ensued. If you know me, you know where I get the streak of knuckleheadedness is from my mother, Beverly. The argument ensued, but it was that piece of saying, you can be trustful if you want to, boy. You better watch them. You better watch what they do to you. You better watch how they're going to treat you. So over time, you file that away. That's what you file away. So now it's time for me to raise my babies. You think I ain't said to my babies, you better watch them. And I'm into work. You better watch them. And I may be doing better now, but that don't mean they still don't hear some of those things. Hey, what happened? I told you, you got to watch that. Because our babies are up against that every day. Our babies are up against that bias every single day. They got to operate through that. So they can't just go be students. There's a whole nother layer that they must address every day. They get off the bus. The white kid can get off the bus and go to school and just be a student. Our babies have to get off the bus, figure out where they may have safety in the school and where they are not received well, figure out if that teacher's going to try to kick me out because I push back, just similar to the way Johnny did, but they didn't like how I did it. Now I got to maneuver through that. I better be articulate and nice and all these things that the white kid didn't have to think about.
Or your kids that push back and say, I ain't doing none of that.
Yeah, I'm about to tear all this shit up. Me and Mike come in your class, we don't like your ass. Mike, let's get an ass today. Right?
That occurs, yeah. That
Yeah,
occurs.
yeah. Just the harsh there's the reality, right? So really, that, Mike, when we talk about the school system and how it is impacting our kids, it's what we continuously discuss and say is that we must be and maintain the aspect of being unapologetic advocates. That our babies have not had unapologetic advocates that look like them. And that's the work that we're going to do. That's work we do now. That's what we're going to do forever. I say to you all the time, Mike, this work is the work of my lifetime. So I won't stop doing this. We will continue to be advocates on the behalf of young black and brown boys. We're not new to that. We are very true to that. And we'll continue to be exactly that.
And you know I got something to add to that, man.
What you got?
As you say that out loud, it just sparks something to me to really be mindful about how our adults have advocates for them. Right? So in the teaching world, in the education world, we have unions who come in and represent teachers at every cost, right? Whether they're right or whether they're wrong, they have union reps that will come in there and argue on their behalf to support them as they are going through their employment journey, right? And it's frustrating because our black and brown babies, specifically our black males, they don't have a union rep for them in the school system. So they have to sit there and take whatever it is that that teacher or that school or that district or that educational system is giving out to them. They have to be there and sit there and take it. Which our motto about being unapologetic advocates for black males is basically we're the union reps for the black males. Ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When we come to the space, we are definitely going to support our black males to the utmost.
Should we be collecting dues at some point?
I don't know if we're going to get no bread, but it's all good. But we're going to support them. And guess what? Just like the union's reps does, when the teacher wrong, they still support. I'm going to still support that young black male, even when they might be wrong.
Yeah.
Now, if everybody leave the room, I'm going to say, hey, man, why you put me in that spot to have to do that?
Yeah.
But I'm going to support them in front of them so they
That's
know
right.
that they got somebody who got their back because no one has had their back.
I did that same thing as a UAW union rep. Like, I'm walking in like, God, Lord, what am I going to say about this one? We know he said he did it. He said he did it. Okay, so I know that. All right, but we're not talking about that. Well, let's talk about something different. This is blah, blah, blah. So I represented people that told me, yeah, I did it. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. Like, okay, so I got to go in here and try to rep that. But black males haven't had that. We have become that. That's what we got to keep doing.
For sure.
All right. So it's a little shorter today, but let's close up. You want to close?
No, you got this, man.
All right. Who closed the last time? We'll say this, is that we appreciate anyone that takes the time to kind of listen to the conversation that we have. We see it as extremely important, and we hope that there are others that see the conversation as important. We're going to keep plugging at it. We're going to keep doing the work and keep having the conversation. So we'll see you again at some point soon. Thanks.